Have you ever wondered what happens to a soul that has walked through darkness so complete it feels endless? Imagine living with someone who systematically erases your sense of self, leaving you questioning reality, doubting your worth, and feeling invisible even when your heart is screaming to be seen. For the true empath, this isn't just a fear, it's a lived experience. And Carl Jung, the father of depth psychology, observed patterns in these survivors that reveal something astonishing. The empath doesn't just endure the darkness, they transform, but here's the part nobody talks about. Surviving a narcissist is not simply about escaping manipulation or reclaiming your freedom. It's about stepping into a new archetype, one that carries a rare energy few people ever understand. Jung referred to this as the process of individuation, the full integration of one's conscious and unconscious self, and for empaths, surviving the narcissist's darkness accelerates this process in ways ordinary life cannot. Wait until you hear this. The empath's journey through a narcissist's shadow is like a descent into the underworld. In myths across cultures, heroes enter the realm of darkness, face monsters, and emerge with treasures that change not only their lives but the world around them. The narcissist functions as a mirror of the darkest aspects of the human psyche, projecting rage, manipulation, and deceit directly onto the empath. By surviving this, the empath gains an unprecedented clarity about human nature, both light and shadow, that most will never experience. Let me illustrate with a story. There was a woman named Selene. Sensitive, intuitive, deeply empathic, she fell into a relationship with a man whose charm masked a relentless need for control. At first she felt special, even seen. But slowly, Selene realized that every decision, every thought, every feeling she had was being scrutinized, manipulated, and subtly punished if it didn't align with his desires. Over time, she began to lose herself, forgetting who she was and what she valued. Her rare empathic energy became a tool for survival, constantly absorbing his moods, appeasing his insecurities, and maintaining the fragile illusion of harmony. But here's the part nobody talks about. What happens when the empath finally recognizes the manipulation and steps out of the narcissist's orbit is profound. It's not just liberation, it's an awakening. Suddenly, the empath discovers layers of their own psyche that were buried under years of self-doubt, people-pleasing, and suppression. Jung would say this is a confrontation with the shadow, both the narcissist's shadow projected onto them and their own unintegrated shadow aspects. This next truth will shock you. The survivor becomes someone entirely new. The empath who endures narcissistic abuse often develops a rare, almost mystical resilience. They learn to sense deception from a mile away, to discern subtle emotional undercurrents, and to understand people on a level that feels intuitive, almost psychic. But the transformation is not just about perception. It's about power, not the type sought by the narcissist, but the quiet, unshakable power of self-knowledge and emotional sovereignty. Let's return to Selene. After leaving the relationship, she didn't just reclaim her life. She began to notice her own energy in ways she never had before. She could sense when someone's emotions were truly theirs versus when they were projections. She recognized patterns in behavior that once trapped her, and she started to create boundaries that were firm, clear, and non-negotiable. Jung would call this an integration of the persona and shadow, the ability to navigate the outer world without losing the inner self. Wait until you hear this. Surviving the narcissist's darkness is like developing a superpower. The empath emerges with heightened perception, profound empathy, and an intuitive understanding of human motives. But there's a caveat. With great power comes the need for discipline. The newly awakened empath must learn how to wield this rare energy consciously. Without mindfulness, there is a risk of using it as a weapon, overextending themselves, or falling back into old patterns of codependency. But here's the part nobody talks about. Many survivors don't realize that the narcissist's abuse is a catalyst, not a curse. The darkness acts like a crucible, forcing the empath to confront not only external manipulation but also internal shadows, suppressed anger, self-doubt, and fear. By facing these aspects of themselves, empaths are able to integrate pieces of their psyche they never accessed before. Jung called this the individuation process, and for empaths, surviving the narcissist accelerates it in ways ordinary challenges cannot. Think of it this way. Imagine a raw diamond buried under years of pressure, hidden beneath layers of earth. The narcissist's darkness is the pressure. The empath is the diamond. The process is painful, exhausting, and often disorienting, but it is precisely this pressure that allows the empath to emerge with brilliance, clarity, and unshakable resilience. Wait until you hear this. The transformation is not only internal. Externally, the survivor often attracts different people, those who are authentic, aligned, and respectful of their boundaries. Their relationships become mirrors of their newly established self-respect. The energy they carry, once drained and misused, now resonates at a frequency that draws honesty, loyalty, and mutual growth. But here's the shocking truth: not all empaths survive unscathed. Some leave the narcissist's shadow carrying deep scars, confusion, or mistrust. This is why Jung emphasized shadow work and integration. The empath must process their experiences, reclaim their energy, and consciously step into the archetype of the empowered self. Only then can the rare energy they carry fully flourish. And here's the part nobody talks about. The empath, after surviving the narcissist, is no longer naive. They have a sixth sense for manipulation, a deep understanding of emotional architecture, and a psychic resilience that protects them from future predation. This transformation is rare, and it is sacred. Jung would argue that the empath has completed a kind of psychological alchemy, turning trauma into wisdom, vulnerability into power, and survival into mastery. So let me ask you this. Do you see yourself in this story? Do you feel the echoes of someone else's darkness in your own history? If so, know this: what you endured was not meaningless. It was the crucible through which your rare empathic energy is being refined. And in the next part, we'll explore exactly what the empath becomes, the archetype of the survivor, the healer, and the boundary setter, and how to fully embody this transformation without losing your humanity or your heart. Have you ever noticed how, after surviving someone who seemed to absorb your very soul, everything else suddenly feels sharper, clearer, more vivid? For the empath who has endured a narcissist's manipulation, the world is no longer a place to wander blindly. Jung would call this the beginning of true individuation, the emergence of the self in a form that is resilient, conscious, and empowered. But here's the part nobody talks about. The shifts in perception aren't subtle. They are seismic. The empath no longer responds automatically to emotional cues. Instead, they analyze, sense, and discern with a precision that feels almost uncanny. Where once they absorbed pain and anger like a sponge, now they recognize it, contain it, and make conscious choices about how to respond. This is not detachment in the cold sense, but a powerful emotional sovereignty, the ability to feel deeply without being consumed. Wait until you hear this. Surviving narcissistic abuse rewires the empath's understanding of boundaries. Previously, boundaries were porous or invisible. The narcissist's manipulation exploited that, feeding off the empath's energy. After the experience, the empath begins to erect structures, emotional, mental, and even physical, that protect their energy while allowing genuine connection. Jung would describe this as the emergence of a differentiated self, the capacity to distinguish between self and other, shadow and light, truth and illusion. Consider a story. A man named Orion had always been an extreme empath. He would feel everyone's pain, often putting others' needs above his own. His partner, a charismatic but controlling individual, thrived on his empathy, drawing it out until he was drained and disoriented. The final break was painful. He realized he had lost himself in trying to sustain someone else's sense of reality. But after leaving, Orion noticed something remarkable. He could now detect subtle patterns in behavior, micro-expressions and unspoken motives with startling clarity. His rare empathic energy had matured into something almost like psychic discernment. But here's the part nobody talks about. These changes also bring vulnerability. The newly empowered empath is aware of how fragile human energy is, both theirs and others. The acute sensitivity that once made them easy prey now becomes a tool, but it also makes them more selective, more cautious. Jung would argue that this selectivity is necessary for healthy individuation. Not everyone is meant to share your energy, and the empath now intuitively understands who belongs in their sphere and who does not. This next truth will shock you. Surviving the narcissist rewires emotional intelligence at a fundamental level. The empath begins to see the interplay of shadow and light not only in others but also within themselves. They recognize the suppressed anger, unacknowledged needs, and hidden fears that the narcissist's behavior exposed. By facing these internal shadows, they cultivate emotional resilience and clarity. The darkness they endured externally becomes a mirror for the work they must do. Internally, let's revisit Orion. After the breakup, he spent months in reflection, therapy, and shadow work. He realized that his instinct to overgive was not just personality but also a coping mechanism developed over years of absorbing collective and ancestral energy. By acknowledging this pattern, he was able to consciously redirect his energy toward pursuits and relationships that were mutually enriching rather than draining. Wait until you hear this. There's another layer. The empath begins to attract relationships that mirror their transformed energy. People who are authentic, honest, and aligned are drawn to the empath like moths to a controlled flame. This is not coincidence. Jung would describe it as the natural resonance of archetypal energies. The empath's refined energy field attracts those who vibrate on the same frequency, creating balanced, life-affirming connections. But here's the part nobody talks about. Surviving the narcissist also brings a heightened sense of responsibility. The empath realizes that their rare energy can influence not just individuals, but environments, communities, even generational patterns. They have become a kind of emotional and psychic anchor, capable of stabilizing chaotic dynamics while maintaining their own integrity. This is not arrogance, it is mastery born from experience. Consider another metaphor. Imagine a forest recovering from wildfire. Initially, the trees are blackened, the soil scorched, and the ecosystem in chaos. Over time, new growth emerges, stronger, more resilient, and better adapted to survive future challenges. The empath is the forest. The narcissist's abuse is the fire. And after the darkness passes, the empath grows back, but not as they were before. They grow wiser, more discerning, and imbued with a rare, regenerative energy. Wait until you hear this. Surviving narcissistic darkness also reshapes the empath's relationship with their own intuition. Where once they doubted their instincts, second-guessed feelings, or ignored gut reactions to avoid conflict, they now trust themselves implicitly. This inner authority becomes a compass, guiding them away from toxic influences and toward experiences that nurture growth, creativity, and joy. But here's the part nobody talks about. The transformation is ongoing. The empath is never fully finished with their growth because life will continue to present mirrors, challenges, and shadow encounters. However, the difference now is that the empath engages with these challenges from a position of strength, awareness, and intentionality. They no longer absorb energy unconsciously. They direct it consciously. Their rare energy, once vulnerable to exploitation, becomes a force of influence and healing. And here's the hidden truth. Surviving the narcissist does not merely restore the empath's previous self. It creates a new archetype, the empowered empath. They are simultaneously more sensitive and more protected, more compassionate and more discerning, more attuned and more sovereign. Jung would describe this as a rare alignment of the conscious and unconscious, a mastery of one's own psyche forged in the crucible of trauma. So let me ask you directly, do you feel the subtle shifts within yourself after surviving darkness? Do you sense that your energy is sharper, your perception clearer, and your boundaries stronger? This is not an accident. It is a transformation Jung would recognize as a true individuation, the emergence of a self that has walked through shadow, confronted deception, and emerged whole. In the next part, we'll explore how this empowered empath navigates the world differently, how they establish unshakable boundaries, maintain emotional sovereignty, and cultivate relationships that reflect the rare energy they now carry. The truths ahead may challenge everything you thought you knew about yourself and others. Have you ever noticed that after enduring extreme emotional manipulation, something shifts inside you that can't be undone? For the empath who survives the narcissist, the change is profound, subtle, and permanent. Jung described this as a confrontation with the shadow, the parts of ourselves we deny, fear, or suppress. And surviving the narcissist forces empaths to confront not only the external darkness, but also the hidden recesses of their own psyche. But here's the part nobody talks about. This internal confrontation is not comfortable. The empath begins to recognize patterns they've avoided for years. People pleasing, overgiving, fear of conflict, and the tendency to doubt their own intuition. The narcissist has reflected these tendencies back with magnified intensity, leaving the empath facing their own shadows in a way that ordinary life rarely demands. Wait until you hear this. The empath's rare energy, once exploited, becomes a tool for profound self-realization. Where they once absorbed energy unconsciously, they now notice the flow of emotional currents in themselves and others. Every interaction becomes a mirror, revealing both what belongs to them and what is projected from outside. Jung would argue that this discernment is a crucial step toward individuation, the emergence of a self that is conscious, aware, and integrated. Consider a story. A woman named Maris had spent years in a relationship with a narcissist who controlled every aspect of her life. She doubted her own perceptions, apologized constantly, and suppressed her desires to avoid conflict. When the relationship ended, Maris experienced a strange phenomenon. She felt both relief and fear, freedom and disorientation. Her rare empathic energy, once consumed by the narcissist, began to pulse with clarity. She could feel her emotions as distinct from others, notice when people were projecting, and trust her intuition like never before. But here's the part nobody talks about. Surviving the narcissist also teaches empaths about the subtle architecture of human manipulation. They begin to see how charm can mask control, how flattery can disguise exploitation, and how love can be weaponized. This insight is not theoretical, it's embodied. The empath senses patterns instinctively, almost like a radar. Where once they were vulnerable, now they are equipped with a kind of emotional armor built from experience and self-knowledge. This next truth will shock you. The internal transformation is often accompanied by a new relationship with boundaries. Before, the empath's energy was porous. They gave endlessly, absorbed others' emotions, and often lost themselves in the process. After surviving a narcissist, boundaries are no longer optional. They are survival mechanisms. They are not walls built from fear, but living, flexible structures that protect the empath's energy while allowing authentic connection. Let's revisit Maris. She began practicing small acts of energetic sovereignty, declining invitations that felt draining, voicing opinions she had previously hidden, and reclaiming her personal space without guilt. Each action reinforced her sense of self, her autonomy, and her rare empathic energy. Jung would call this the emergence of a differentiated self, the ability to navigate relationships consciously, aware of the flow of energy, and capable of maintaining integrity even in emotionally charged situations. Wait until you hear this. Surviving the narcissist also brings a heightened emotional intelligence. The empath learns to read between the lines, detect unspoken motives, and sense underlying emotional currents. They develop a rare kind of empathy, not the naive absorption of others' feelings, but a conscious understanding of human behavior, motives, and shadows. This insight allows them to interact with the world with both compassion and discernment. But here's the part nobody talks about. The survivor often experiences an existential shift. They realize that their experiences, painful as they were, have unlocked something essential: the ability to understand human darkness without being consumed by it. They can navigate complexity, ambiguity, and deception in ways most people cannot. Jung would say this is the integration of the shadow. The empath is no longer dominated by external darkness, but carries an inner illumination that guides their path. Consider another metaphor. Imagine a butterfly emerging from a cocoon. The struggle inside the chrysalis is essential. It strengthens the wings, prepares the body for flight, and transforms the creature entirely. The empath's survival of narcissistic abuse is like this metamorphosis. The darkness is the cocoon, the struggle is the challenge, and the transformation is a new self, stronger, wiser, and able to navigate the world with rare insight and precision. Wait until you hear this. The transformation is not just about defense. It's also about creation. The empath begins to attract experiences, relationships, and opportunities aligned with their new energy. They no longer settle for anything less than authenticity. Their rare empathic energy becomes a beacon. It draws in those who resonate with their frequency and repels those who do not. This shift is subtle, powerful, and life-altering. But here's the hidden truth. Surviving the narcissist is not the end of the journey. It is a catalyst. The empath has been forced to confront their own shadows, reclaim their energy, and build emotional sovereignty. The next step, which Jung emphasizes repeatedly, is conscious integration, understanding the patterns, mastering emotional boundaries, and stepping fully into the archetype of the empowered empath. So let me ask you, do you feel the subtle yet profound changes within yourself after surviving manipulation and darkness? Do you notice a clarity in perception, a strength in boundaries, and a deeper understanding of human behavior? This is not accidental. It is the emergence of the empath as a transformed, empowered being, someone who has endured shadow and now walks with illumination. In the next part, we'll explore how this transformation manifests in the external world, how the empath navigates relationships, sets unshakable boundaries, and uses their rare energy to attract authenticity while repelling manipulation. You'll learn the practical and psychological steps that allow the survivor to fully embody this rare, empowered self. Have you ever noticed how some people seem to step into a room and instantly shift the energy, commanding presence without raising their voice? For the empath who has survived a narcissist, this is not an accident. Their rare energy, once vulnerable and porous, has matured into something precise, magnetic, and sovereign. Jung would describe this as the emergence of the archetype of the empowered empath, someone who has integrated shadow, reclaimed their energy, and now navigates the world with discernment and authority. But here's the part nobody talks about. This transformation doesn't make the empath cold or detached. On the contrary, their emotional sensitivity remains, but it is now refined. They feel deeply, but they no longer absorb chaos indiscriminately. They can engage with people authentically without being consumed by external shadows. Their interactions are deliberate, conscious, and intentional. This is the quiet power of someone who has endured darkness and emerged whole. Wait until you hear this. Surviving a narcissist fundamentally changes how empaths perceive relationships. Where they once unconsciously sought approval or validation, they now prioritize alignment and authenticity. They intuitively sense emotional projections, manipulations, and hidden motives. This isn't paranoia. It's a heightened perception developed through experience. They no longer mistake charm for character or flattery for sincerity. Their rare energy acts like a psychic radar, protecting them while allowing genuine connection. Consider a story. A woman named Lyra spent years entangled with a narcissistic partner who thrived on her overgiving and sensitivity. After leaving, she noticed something remarkable. She could feel the energy of a room, detect subtle emotional shifts, and anticipate the intentions of those around her. It was as if her rare empathic energy had evolved into a sophisticated instrument for discerning truth. People often described her as magnetic or wise beyond her years, but she knew the source. Her survival had refined her energy. But here's the part nobody talks about. This refinement is not automatic. It requires conscious practice. The empath must learn to maintain boundaries, protect their energy, and discern between projection and authentic emotion. Jung would argue that this is the hallmark of individuation, the integration of unconscious material into consciousness. The empath has not only survived external darkness, but has consciously integrated the lessons and shadows they encountered, turning vulnerability into strength. This next truth will shock you. The empowered empath begins to attract people and experiences that match their refined energy. Toxic individuals who once dominated or manipulated them are naturally repelled. Relationships become mirrors of mutual respect, honesty, and authenticity. This alignment is not about perfection. It's about resonance. The empath's energy now sets the standard, consciously or unconsciously. For who they allow into their lives, let's return to Lyra. She began setting clear boundaries, declining interactions that felt draining and engaging with people who were emotionally mature and authentic. Initially, it felt uncomfortable. Old habits die slowly. But over time, she noticed a shift. Her social circle became healthier, her career interactions more productive, and her personal energy more stable. Jung would describe this as the empowerment of the self through conscious boundary management, the ability to navigate the external world without sacrificing internal integrity. Wait until you hear this. Surviving narcissistic darkness also enhances decision-making. The empath no longer operates from fear, obligation, or unconscious people-pleasing. Choices are deliberate, aligned with values, and reinforced by intuition honed through experience. The rare empathic energy now serves as both compass and shield, guiding the empath toward authentic opportunities while protecting against manipulation and chaos. But here's the part nobody talks about. The survivor also becomes a quiet healer. People are naturally drawn to their energy because it radiates clarity, understanding, and emotional safety. Friends, family, and colleagues unconsciously sense that this empath has endured shadow and emerged resilient. This magnetic presence is not consciously wielded as power, but it influences environments, stabilizes interactions, and fosters trust. The empath becomes a living example of transformation through adversity. Consider another metaphor. Imagine a sword forged in fire. The intense heat, hammering, and quenching process shapes it into a weapon both strong and precise. The narcissist's abuse is the fire, the survival the hammering, and the empath's integration the quenching process. What emerges is not a fragile or brittle tool, but a refined instrument, resilient, sharp, and capable of precise impact. Wait until you hear this. The empowered empath's mastery extends to energy management. They intuitively know when to give, when to hold back, and when to create space for themselves. Previously, they may have overextended, drained themselves in the service of others, or absorbed chaos without realizing it. Now, energy is consciously regulated, preserved, and intentionally directed. Jung would see this as a conscious relationship with the psyche's energy, a form of psychic self-mastery. But here's the hidden truth. Surviving the narcissist doesn't just change external interactions. It changes the empath internally. They develop patience, resilience, and self-compassion. They understand the fluidity of human behavior and the inevitability of shadow. They no longer fear darkness, but engage with it consciously, integrating lessons rather than being consumed by them. The rare empathic energy now carries wisdom, discernment, and clarity, a beacon both for themselves and those around them. So let me ask you, do you feel the subtle shifts in your energy after surviving manipulation and abuse? Do you notice your boundaries stronger, your perception sharper, and your emotional resilience deeper? This is not happenstance. It is the emergence of the empath as an archetype of transformation, someone who has endured shadow, integrated lessons, and now walks the world with conscious, refined, and rare energy. In the next part, we'll explore the empath's internal mastery, how they cultivate emotional sovereignty, strengthen intuition, and reclaim their inner world from the lingering influence of past abuse. You'll discover the practical and psychological methods that allow the survivor to maintain this rare energy in everyday life. Have you ever wondered what it truly means to reclaim your inner world after someone systematically tried to dismantle it? For the empath who has survived a narcissist, this is no longer theoretical, it is a daily practice. Jung would describe this as conscious individuation, the act of integrating all parts of the psyche while establishing emotional sovereignty. The empath has survived external manipulation, and now the real work begins, mastering the inner landscape. But here's the part nobody talks about. Internal mastery isn't about suppressing emotions or becoming tough. On the contrary, it's about fully feeling, processing, and understanding them without losing yourself. The survivor empath learns to identify which feelings are their own and which have been projected onto them. This is a subtle skill, almost like separating threads in a tapestry, discernment that requires patience, awareness, and courage. Wait until you hear this. One of the most significant shifts occurs in the empath's relationship with fear. During the narcissistic relationship, fear of abandonment, judgment, or punishment often dictated actions. After surviving, the empath begins to face fear deliberately, observing it without judgment. Jung would argue that this is shadow work in action, acknowledging the parts of ourselves that once controlled us and transforming them into sources of insight and strength. Consider a story. A woman named Ilara had spent years trying to meet her partner's impossible standards. Her empathy had become a tool for appeasement. After leaving, she noticed that fear still lingered, fear of repeating old patterns, fear of misjudging people, fear of being vulnerable. Instead of suppressing it, she began to observe it, journal about it, and meditate with it. Slowly, she realized that fear was no longer a dictator but a teacher, signaling where her boundaries were being tested or where intuition needed attention. But here's the part nobody talks about. This process often reveals layers of emotional resilience the empath didn't know existed. By consciously facing fear, anger, sadness, and doubt, the empath rebuilds the inner foundation of their psyche. Each encounter with a challenging emotion becomes a brick, reinforcing strength, clarity, and autonomy. This is how the empath transforms internal vulnerability into rare energy that is now consciously directed rather than unconsciously absorbed. This next truth will shock you. Surviving the narcissist also refines the empath's intuition. Previously, their sensitivity may have been chaotic, overwhelmed by projections and manipulations. Now, intuition becomes precise, almost surgical. They sense motives, detect subtle emotional cues, and can navigate complex dynamics with confidence. This refined energy allows them to operate in the world with both compassion and discernment. Balancing empathy with wisdom, let's revisit Ilara. She began applying her refined energy in everyday life. She could now sense when a conversation was draining her and gracefully withdraw. She noticed which opportunities aligned with her authentic desires and which were traps for overextension. Jung would argue that this is a conscious integration of unconscious processes. The empath is no longer reactive but proactive, capable of shaping their experience intentionally. Wait until you hear this. Emotional sovereignty also means mastering self-talk and internal narrative. Many survivors have spent years internalizing the narcissist's criticism and projections. Rebuilding requires consciously challenging these internalized voices, replacing self-doubt with clarity and reframing experiences as lessons rather than condemnations. The empath learns to become their own protector, guide, and source of validation. But here's the part nobody talks about. Cultivating internal mastery is not linear. There will be setbacks, triggers, and moments of doubt. However, each encounter with residual shadows strengthens the empath's inner framework. Jung would describe this as iterative shadow integration. The empath repeatedly faces internal darkness, processes it, and emerges stronger. Over time, the rare energy they carry becomes both resilient and regenerative, capable of sustaining authentic engagement with the world. Consider another metaphor. Imagine a gardener tending to a wild, overgrown garden. Initially, the plants are tangled, weeds invasive, and paths unclear. Through patient cultivation, pruning, and care, the garden becomes orderly yet vibrant, capable of supporting life and beauty. The empath's inner world is the garden. Narcissistic abuse was the storm that disrupted it. Conscious emotional mastery is the act of restoration, turning chaos into fertile ground for growth, insight, and empowerment. Wait until you hear this. The empowered empath also begins to embody a rare kind of presence. People unconsciously recognize their clarity, strength, and inner sovereignty. This presence isn't loud or forceful, but magnetic. It draws authenticity, repels manipulation, and fosters environments where emotional integrity is honored. Survivors often report that others feel different around them, a testament to the refinement of their rare empathic energy. But here's the hidden truth: internal mastery is ongoing. The empath's energy must be consciously nurtured, protected, and integrated daily. Practices such as meditation, journaling, energy clearing, and shadow work are not optional. They are essential for maintaining the rare balance between sensitivity and sovereignty. Jung would insist that this conscious engagement with the psyche is the mark of true individuation. So let me ask you, do you feel the stirrings of this inner mastery within yourself? Can you sense the rare energy emerging as you navigate residual fears, reclaim boundaries, and refine your intuition? This is not coincidence. It is the transformation that occurs when the empath survives the darkness, integrates shadow, and consciously steps into the empowered self. In the next part, we'll explore the empath's relationships after surviving narcissistic abuse, how they navigate intimacy, friendship, and professional connections with a new lens of clarity, boundaries, and rare energy. You'll discover how the outer world begins to reflect the inner mastery cultivated through surviving darkness. Have you ever noticed how some people seem to attract relationships that mirror their inner strength and clarity? For the empath who has survived a narcissist, this is not coincidence. The internal mastery they've cultivated, their emotional sovereignty, refined intuition, and integrated shadow begins to manifest externally. Jung would describe this as the projection of the individuated self. The outer world now reflects the inner transformation, but here's the part nobody talks about. Surviving a narcissist doesn't just teach empaths to protect themselves. It reshapes how they choose connection altogether. Where they once unconsciously gave energy to anyone, now they intuitively assess alignment, authenticity, and resonance. Relationships are no longer obligations or attempts at approval. They are conscious exchanges that honor both parties' energy. Wait until you hear this. The empowered empath navigates intimacy differently. Vulnerability is still present, but it is no longer reckless. The empath has learned to discern when a partner's emotions are projections, when patterns are repeating, and when boundaries are being tested. This allows them to engage with emotional honesty without losing themselves. A skill most people never fully develop. Consider a story. A man named Kale had spent years in a relationship where his empathy was used as a tool for control. Every kindness, every compromise, and every moment of emotional availability was twisted into leverage against him. After leaving, Kale noticed a remarkable shift. He now intuitively recognized the subtle cues of manipulation, micro-expressions, tone, and emotional inconsistencies. He could feel whether someone's intentions were genuine before words even confirmed it. This rare energy became a form of social discernment, allowing him to create meaningful, aligned relationships. But here's the part nobody talks about. This transformation also changes friendships. The empath begins to attract people who respect their energy and repel those who drain it. Social circles often shift dramatically. Old acquaintances may feel rejected, not because the empath is cruel, but because their energy no longer resonates with people who thrived on chaos or superficiality. Jung would argue that this is natural. The outer world mirrors the inner self. As the empath grows, their environment adjusts accordingly. This next truth will shock you. In professional settings, the empowered empath also experiences profound shifts. Where they may have once overextended, absorbed stress, or taken on others' emotional burdens, they now operate with clarity and strategic discernment. They notice when colleagues or superiors project stress or manipulation, and they respond with awareness rather than reactive absorption. Their rare energy becomes both a shield and a tool for navigating complex dynamics. Let's revisit Kale in his new career. He found himself surrounded by people who were emotionally transparent and aligned with his values. He could sense who contributed positively and who introduced subtle toxicity. His rare empathic energy guided his professional choices, allowing him to thrive without the constant drain he once endured. Jung would see this as the external manifestation of shadow integration. The empath is now influencing and choosing environments that reflect their inner mastery. Wait until you hear this. Surviving narcissistic darkness also alters romantic expectations. The empath no longer seeks validation through sacrifice or submission. Instead, they seek partnership, mutual respect, and shared growth. They can tolerate differences, conflicts, and challenges, but they refuse to tolerate deception, manipulation, or energy theft. This refined selection process is part of their evolved energy, a conscious filter for authenticity. But here's the part nobody talks about. The empowered empath also learns subtle energy management in group dynamics. Social events, family gatherings, and even casual encounters no longer overwhelm them. They can engage without absorption, influence without aggression, and maintain calm while others react impulsively. Their rare energy creates a stabilizing effect, drawing harmony and clarity into chaotic environments. This is not learned from books or lectures. It is a byproduct of surviving extreme manipulation and integrating the lessons. Consider another metaphor. Imagine a lighthouse on a rocky coast. Once, it was battered by storms, weakened by constant pressure, and barely functional. After restoration and careful fortification, it now stands resilient, its light piercing the darkness, guiding ships safely without being consumed by the waves. The empath, after surviving narcissistic darkness, embodies this lighthouse. Their rare energy stabilizes relationships, environments, and interactions while remaining anchored in their own inner world. Wait until you hear this. Boundaries in all types of relationships, romantic, familial, professional, and social, become non-negotiable. The empath no longer apologizes for asserting limits, declining requests, or prioritizing their energy. Where before boundaries were fluid and porous, now they are conscious, flexible, yet firm. Jung would call this the emergence of an integrated self capable of navigating the outer world without being manipulated or drained. But here's the hidden truth. The empath's transformation is contagious. People drawn to their rare energy are subtly influenced, encouraged to face their own shadows, and inspired to establish personal sovereignty. The survivor doesn't have to preach, guide, or control. Their energy alone sets a standard of clarity, authenticity, and resilience. This is the unspoken power of the empath after surviving darkness. So let me ask you, do you notice the subtle changes in how people respond to you after enduring manipulation or abuse? Can you sense when interactions honor your energy and when they don't? This is your rare empathic energy in action, the external manifestation of internal mastery, integration, and conscious transformation.